Okay, you get the idea. That is a double-sided 7-inch single by an artist called Christian Markley. It's called, when referenced, The Brown Record, for it is pressed in brown vinyl. And he was an artist. Because of his practice, he gave me permission to be able to do some of the things I now do. Because there are times when you're making things and you think, fucking hell, this is shit. And nobody else will understand what I am doing. And then you come across another artist who is doing something equally as perverse. And you think, oh no, it's okay. Somebody else is doing something like it as well. And Christian Markley was one of those artists that did that. And I was amazed when I found him. He's now very famous and probably very rich. But he originally started as a turntablist, which he still does. So he was sort of experimenting with turntables in the 80s, well late 70s probably as well, in the 80s particularly. So he was using turntables as objects and just making noise with them and, you know, playing around with the styluses and just making awful, awful noises. And there was a gallerist called Jack Hanley in San Francisco where he was, and Jack, who is still a dealer and a fantastic man, must be well into his 60s by now, looks like Father Christmas. He's got a big white beard, loads of white hair, he's just the coolest guy. And he's moved to New York these days. Anyway, he said to Christian Markley, what you're doing is art. And Christian said, no, it's not. It's probably music, I might think that. No, it's art, it's definitely art. Well, that's brilliant. And so that brought him into a different fold, a different area of work. So there it is, it's double-sided, and it is the recordings of the artist's own flashlights on both sides. And it is a very, very, very rare record. I don't know how many were pressed, but not that many, and I now own one. He sent me, I had a short correspondence with him. I put him in a show, and this was in the show, and I said, Christian, can I wear any brown ribbons? And he said, yeah, and he gave it, so that's fantastic. So that was brilliant. So that's, because Phil said, could you talk about some people that helped you, you know, influences and stuff. And another person who I would say was an artist that, I mean, this is, you know, to draw an analogy, any lineage between him and me is ludicrous, obviously. But Bruce Nauman, who is a fantastic artist, and again, I don't know how old he is now, he must be in his 70s. And he did a brilliant installation at Tate Modern in 2005 where he took all his video pieces, all the video pieces he'd been making from, I don't know, the 60s, probably late 60s, which is when he started making performance and sound stuff. And he, in the Turbine Hall, he just played on separate speakers, he just played the sound of each one of them. So you just went in it, it sounded like, well, I've said it sounded like purgatory or hell, because you just came into the huge Turbine Hall of Tate Modern, and this noise of voices and shouting, because a lot of his videos were such. And so I did a recording of that. I was making bootlegs at the time, and I did a recording of that called No, which is one of the pieces he has of a clown, and it has the trademark of Quality, which was a famous bootlegger who bootlegged Bob Dylan bootlegs, one of the first ones, and I bootlegged his stamp and stamped it on there, and that's got the recording of me walking around this place with it. And I was selling it for £5, but there's a special £3 deal for tonight. I have 10 here, if anybody wants one. It is a fantastic recording, because it's such a brilliant installation. It's not my recording that's brilliant, it's his work. It's so fantastic. Right, the piece that I have in the anthology online, on the Kindle version, I'm not going to read, but I'm going to talk to you a bit about it, because I've lost it. Oh, it's here. and it is actually a print. But it exists on the, which it just worked out. He just says, he bumps into me somewhere and he says, are you doing anything? And I say, well, I've done this thing. says, well, let's see what, maybe it'll work out. And it did. So, and this also involves Mike, because Mike was doing an exhibition and he had pieces of oak from a library shelf that he gave to various artists for an exhibition. They could do anything they liked with it in reference to a paperback, because it is paperback sized. And so I used a laser cutter, because I was working at M2U as an artist, anyway, as a scheme. And so I had it laser cut so that it is a printing block. So all kind of, the idea of it being a book, I mean, all just sort of fantastic coincidence, really. And so that's what it is. It is so that's the piece of work. This is the distributable text that goes with it, if you like. And the text is on the Kindle, and it's a piece about my cousin and the Velvet Underground, and me giving him a book and him developing schizophrenia. And the reason that occurred was because I had been researching, I had been looking, I mean, I've always been, I have a history of art, but my history is really the history of music. Popular music, that's, I'm 53. Death, you don't know that. And, I've grown up through pop music. And I was researching into music, and I was interested in authenticity, the thing of life, and I was listening to a lot of blues, and so I started reading about blues, and with particular reference to Stagger Lee, which is a song that continues, and the various research I've done says that it's still characters within hip-hop still kind of have reference to the idea of Stagger Lee. And Stagger Lee is somebody who went into a bar. Stagger Lee shot. I can't remember his name now. I did loads of research about it. Anyway, Stagger Lee in the song, he shoots somebody and gets into terrible trouble. So I started looking into the idea of mythology and the idea of people's lives and how maybe people's lives should be mythologized, just normal, regular folks. And their lives, not special people who go into bars and shoot people, but other people. So again, a couple of coincidences occurring, like when you're making a piece of work, you're making one thing over there, making another thing over there. And in my cellar I had a shovel. And I thought, blimey, that looks a bit like a guitar. What a great thing that is. So I sort of thought about it for a bit, and then decided, right, okay, I will make the thing that it is. I will make the instrument that it should be. So I made this, which I have played. It's acoustically. It's very difficult to hear here, but I've now decided that I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to use contact mics, and I'm going to make it an electric guitar. So I'm going to go all Bob Dylan, and people will shout. Anyway, so I'm not going to play it now, but it's a 3-string instrument that I've made using guitar strings, a bit of Christmas tree around there for the bridge, and some hard wood that I've whittled into the pegs for it. At the same time, I was writing a story, a tale, which became the Ballad of Ben, the Song of the Shovel. So the two things became one thing. I was doing this little bit of writing about this lad who lived at the bottom of our road, at the end of our road. And I shall read you that. So I performed this at the end of our road, because I was thinking, well, I need to perform this. Where should I do it? Well, quite obviously I should do it at the end of our road, because it is for the people who live in the road, who knew the lad who lived in that house. And I was at the end of the road, which is a cul-de-sac, which I'll explain again, and just across the way was Ben's house, although by that time Ben had actually moved out. So this is the Ballad of Ben, the Song of the Shovel. If you can hear me, I'm not going to use the mic. Is that okay? Is that alright with everybody? Yeah. The Ballad of Ben, the Song of the Shovel. Ben lived in the house at the end of our road. We live in a cul-de-sac. He and the other kids used to play football at the entrance to the road. When we moved in, Ben would have been about 10. He was very affable, bright kid, with blonde hair. He was inquisitive and confident enough to engage in conversation. And I can't remember the whole process, but as a cul-de-sac is particular in as much as it is a container, rather than the pipe that a road is. You can only drive out at one end. And since Ben and the other kids played there, you would have to break up their game. Football mostly, but occasionally cricket. And in later years, just standing around. Ben would obstruct our exit, standing in front of the car. I would wind down the window and ask how he was doing. I liked Ben. He took time to chat. I suppose this happened until he was 14 or so, and then he stopped playing at the end of the road so much. I would still talk to him if I saw him. He was now taller than me. I knew from the brief knowledge I had of his character that school would be a challenging environment for him. He had 2 sisters and a brother, all blonde-haired, all very personable. Ben was the eldest. His father was younger than me and had 4 kids. I thought of him as quite straight-laced, although I believe he was living in Hume during the late 80s, early 90s, and that implies wilder days. I got the impression that he was quite strict with his kids, and as Ben got to his teenage years, the more they took each other on. His mother seemed nice enough. Sometime between 14 and 15, I got the impression that Ben was having increasing confrontations at home. I've no idea really, but there was one incident that I was dragged into. I was at home one evening when Ben's dad knocked on our door. He had found an opened package under Ben's bed that had been posted to me but accidentally delivered to his address. He wanted me to go down to their house and confront Ben about the theft of the package and the seriousness of thieving. I went slightly bemused. I had no children at the time. And in their front room stood before Ben, who was a good 6 inches taller than me, and explained why stealing was bad. Using examples from my own experience, I briefly illustrated that messing with the law was a loser's game. Just before his GCSE mocks, Ben was thrown out of his house and told by his dad that he was not his dad. I saw him on the road and went to talk to him. He told me then. He can't have known long. This was just before Christmas. A few months later, I was in the car and saw him walking down the road. He was wearing one fingerless driving glove. We joked about this, and he said he was in a gang. He said they'd robbed a phone shop. He knew it wasn't good, but gave the impression that he had no choice, although now he was in, it occurred to him that he might not be able to get out, because they had the robbery over him. He was living with a foster family. He seemed unsettled. The last time I saw him, he was in Asda, quite a few months later. He must have been 16, maybe 17. He looked well. His GCSEs had finally gone okay, and he had got a job. I said that was good, and it looked like it was all going well. As I turned to leave, he said, "Oh, my girlfriend's pregnant." And I said, "Great." I haven't seen him for at least 2 years. So that was the Ballad of Ben. And I just wanted the people around to know his story, because it wasn't exceptional as a story. We all have stories in our lives, and it wasn't exceptional, but it was sort of pertinent, I thought, because that's what people's lives are like. So then I started thinking about my own life, and I had a story in my life that, and this is a very emotional story for me, and last time I did it, I actually bloody well had to hold the tears back. So in fact, if it gets embarrassing like that, I'll do my best. It's really irritating, but it's an amazing thing that happens. Anyway, so this was about my uncle, and I make visual art. That's the idea. I don't make, in as much as I don't make things that necessarily haven't been up till now read. They haven't been about words. They've been about objects that you put in a gallery space, in a white space, and you leave them there, and you go away, and other people look at them, and then they decide what they believe is going on. You believe that you have imparted in some way what you believe is going on, but the responsibility actually ends up in their hands, not in yours. You're not there to explain it to them. Anyway, so I was like, well, if I'm making texts, there should be a visual element to this, because I'm going to put them in the gallery and then I'm going to leave and I just didn't want to write. But as I did that, I realised that this was a reading, so that's probably why I ended up being an experimental So this is an object that I've made, and as you can see, I don't know if you're familiar with this record, but it's a Beatles record, it's the second Beatles record. And on it, that's where the sleeve notes go. And that's the track listing, and then I've put the tail where the sleeve notes go. So I shall read this, and then a couple of other small things that came from it. When I was a small boy in the early 1960s, I had a feeling that my favourite Uncle Doug was in the Beatles. Later in my life, most probably in the early 70s, I was given 3 of Doug's old Beatles singles: Help, I'm Down, A Hard Day's Night, Ticket to Ride, I Feel Fine, She's a Woman. Along with it, his copy of the second Beatles album, With the Beatles, released in 1963. Sometime in 1968, when he was 19, Doug was the passenger in a car crash. The driver was injured but okay. Douglas received serious head injuries that left him with a damaged brain. He was awarded several £1,000s in compensation, but started drinking heavily and fell in with other alcoholics. He has since become a vagrant alcoholic, living off his compensation. At one point, he found a place within an evangelical Christian church. He stopped drinking for a while, but has apparently lapsed back, and I'm not sure what has happened to him since. When he had the accident, he was taken to hospital and left for dead in the corridor. It was my Auntie Angela, Doug's youngest sister, who noticed he was still alive. It is said that if England had experienced the head injuries that had happened during the IRA years by this time, his injuries may have been less consequential. The Beatles are still ubiquitous in this world. In fact, the Beatles are used to define all culture. They are used as a ruler to measure all our lives by. 4 larky Liverpool lads turn out to be the most acclaimed artists of recent history. They are recognised worldwide, influential across cultures, the Beatles. I can't wait for Paul to die, so Ringo can say that it was all his idea. He was a genius Svengali figure and the other 3 just part of his master plan. I frequently find I'm singing a Beatles tune and it often takes me by surprise. I didn't want it there, it just arrives, brought to me through any number of outlets and mediums. John Lennon was shot, George Harrison died of cancer in his 50s, Paul McCartney lost his first wife to cancer, and his divorce from his second wife hit the tabloids and gossip columns big time. Ringo Starr, recently referred to as a Beatle, doesn't really get into the news. Doug is still alive, I assume. Nothing has been heard to the contrary. He must be 58 by now. His family does intervene in his life occasionally. My mum, Doug's eldest sister, tried to help him, visiting him and seeing how he was. But one time, in his confusion, he made sexual remarks and she found it difficult to sustain her relationship with him. I know he is regularly in her thoughts. In 1964, she took me to see A Hard Day's Night. I was 4 years old. I saw it again recently. It is a terrible film. It is dated very badly, and Lennon comes across as an egocentric bully. It was the first film I saw. Ringo recently asked through his website for fans to stop sending him things or getting in touch in any way. He has stopped signing autographs and wants to be known from now on as Richard Starkey. A couple of weeks ago, my mum went to visit Doug with my Uncle John. It was Doug's 60th birthday. Since the time of the accident, John, the eldest brother, always felt that he should have stopped Doug going in the car. He told him it wasn't roadworthy. My mum said Doug sat in his chair like a drunk Father Christmas. I was at a family wedding earlier this year and we started talking about Douglas. One of my cousins, who is 15 years younger than me, mentioned that as a child she had always believed that her Uncle Doug was in the Beatles. So that's that one. And then at a similar sort of time, I'll tell you what, No, I won't do that. I told Phil that I was going to do some record stuff, which I decided not to, and I made a record there out of something. And here's another piece that I made about the same sort of time, which is a fall cover from Mr. Pharmacist, and I made this, and there was a little bit of text in here. And so what I started listening out for were anecdotes that involved musicians, I guess, mostly, things that occurred to me. So there's a little bit of text on here, and I'll take that out, and I've written this instead. I met a writer from New York, the Lower East Side. He said he always hated the Fall. He used to supply the porn industry and Marky Smith with methamphetamine. He said he was whingy. I said, he's our Dan Flavin. I meant Dan Graham. Now that was an art joke. Which went over a lot of people's heads, which is a great thing. But it was ridiculous, because Dan Graham might well be the American Marky Smith. Dan Graham is a very serious, well, in many ways quite a serious artist, and practiced from the late 60s onwards, made very intense things about social housing and such like, and also a great documentary about rock music. And there was a sense that and he really liked Marky Smith, I know that. Dan Flavin, on the other hand, makes art using neon tubes. So it was a dreadful art faux pas, which didn't travel very well here, as I thought might be the case. But there's something for me about now I'm into words in the way that I am. It's the ambiguity of it, it's the open-ended quality of it that I enjoy. And this was another piece I made, which is to be looked at, as you can see, for it should go in a frame and sit on the wall. But there is a text. And there's a drawing of a record. And the record is Nut Rocker by Jack B. Nimble and the Quicks, which is a rock and roll version of the Nutcracker Suite, which I'm sure you all know. And the anecdote below it is, I was in an art fair in Cologne, talking to a dealer from New York about Mike Kelly. He said he was a fragile man. He had played guitar with him. Kim Fowley was playing in town, but I missed him. He is 72. And to unravel that, it's sort of a puzzle that you would have to Google various things to kind of get the full story of that piece of work. But I kind of enjoy the conciseness and open-endedness of that, which I like a lot. Right, finally, a more recent, the last thing that is probably, it's almost certainly going to be a piece of work with a piece of text. And I've just bought the record that is going to be, it's probably going to be a painting, which is hilarious because I have no skill at painting. But that's never stopped me so far with these things. But the text that will be underneath the painting is this, and this happened quite recently. I shook hands with Sean Ryder at an exhibition. I said, see what art can do. He looked at me and said, I can see. Yeah, it was an immense put down. It was fantastic. What a great thing to receive from Sean Ryder. Yeah, he just looked me up and down and went, yeah, I can see. Okay, right, I think well, I'll tell you what, I'll play the record that I made from the, that I did, and then we're done. So at the beginning of the, before I read the With the Beatles text about my uncle, I have his singles, and I use my thumb on the stylus to just loop over the beginning of each record. And one of the records is Help. So it just makes this, I make it very loud as well. So just over the word Help. And then from that I've made a dub plate, which is an easily, there is facility now to create a record that you can just send a file on the internet to people who have a vinyl cutter, and they will just cut your record. So I can just send this sound file and I get a 7-inch single back. And this is a one-sided 7-inch single, and it's called Help. And it sounds like this. And this is from the performance. mic. The mic.
Oh.
Not the jukebox. I don't think it matters that much. You get the gist. That's it. That's it. That'll do.
I think it's up if you want.
No, that's fine. No problem. Okay, and if you want to read the other piece, then you have to buy the anthology, I believe. Which is somewhere in this centre. Right, lovely. Thank you.